Welcome to the fourth video in this advanced Excel course. In this video, we're going to learn about pivot tables. You must have heard about pivot tables. They are the most talked about function in Excel of all time. Now, but they're very simple. A lot of people try to, make this image that pivot tables are very difficult, but they're actually not. They're very straightforward. If you just follow a simple method. What is the method? Now let's go to the pivot table sheet first. Actually, let's look at the data that we have. We've already seen it. We have district, block, school name, management, and we have the highest class, lowest class. Then we have enrollment figures and the number of teachers. There's another column I've added here, which is the minority region column. Now, if it's true, it is 1. If it's false, it is 0. That's just one more column here. Okay. Now we look at the pivot tables column. This is how you use pivot tables. First, you have to know what is it that you are looking for. Okay, what does that mean? Let's just look at this first table. What does this show me? It shows me that the Department of Education has 235 schools and the government sponsored has 141 schools and madrasa recognized are 94 schools. Grand total there are 470 schools, which is true because if you look at our enrollment data sheet, we totally, let me just scroll to the bottom, have 470 schools. So this is correct. Now, I have generated this using pivot table, but to generate this, first I need to have this picture clear in my mind that my final table has to look something like this, where the management options are on the left side as the rows and the total count is on the second column. Now, how do we generate this? Let's go back to our enrollment data. I'll go to the top. Now, what I'll do is I'll first select this whole data. The way to do that is you just press Ctrl A and all your data gets selected. Then in the insert tab, you'll see the first option is pivot table. You click on pivot table. What does it say? It says select a table or range. We've already selected that table or range. Then choose where to place the pivot table. It's a good idea to always place the pivot table in a new worksheet. It keeps things neat and simpler for you to work with. Then you just click OK and you see a new sheet is generated with an empty pivot table. This is what the pivot table looks like when it is empty. And on the right side, you have this pivot table fields. Now this, if you see here on the top, you have this field list button. That is what enables this. So if you click on it, it will go away. If you click on it again, it will come back. And using this, you can kind of make it smaller. So what is this? Field names. If you remember, these are all our header rows. Look at this, all our headers for all the columns, school name, UDIS code, highest class, lowest class, all of that has automatically showed up here. School name, UDIS code, management, all of that has showed up here. Now, to create the pivot table that we just saw, what we need is that the management has to come as the first column as rows. So what you do is you just click on management and look, I'm dragging it all the way into rows. There you go. You've already got your management showing up as rows. Now what you need in the second column is the number of schools that fall under each of these managements. And the way to do that is that you take management again, but this time you drop it under values. And that's it. You have got the count for each of these management types. You've got the count of how many schools fall under that management. It's really that simple. That is all there is to pivot tables. Now let's try to create a slightly more advanced pivot table. Now we need to create the pivot table on the same data again. So the simplest way of doing it is the table that you've just generated. Just select it, copy and paste it again. There you go. Now you have another pivot table ready to be used. First, what we'll do is we'll just uncheck this so that it's a empty pivot table again. This time we want all the blocks first. So I'll drag the block field into rows and there you go. It shows me the 4 unique block values: Gorubathan, Kalimpong Municipality, Kalimpong 1 and Kalimpong 2. Now I want to see under each of these blocks, how many schools fall under each of these managements. So for that, the management has to go as columns. If I put it here, there you go. But no values are generated right now. Why? Because there's nothing in the values column. So again, since I'm looking at the management values or the block values, I can drag either of them. Let's just take the management one and I'll put it in values. And there you go. Your total is 470, which is what we had before as well. And Department of Education had 235 schools, which is what you also have here, but you also get that those 235 are actually 69 in this block, 14 in this block, 88 in this block, and 64 in this one. Similarly, for government sponsored and madrasa recognized as well. So this is how you use pivot tables. What pivot tables allow you to do is, if you remember from our previous video, we talked about COUNTIF and SUMIF functions. Pivot table allow you to do that in a simpler manner with just dragging and dropping. You don't have to write any formula on your own. It will do everything for you. You just have to drag the right thing in the right way, right? Now let's try to create a slightly more advanced pivot table. We were working here. So what I'll do first is I'll create a new pivot table and then I'll just uncheck this so it's empty. Now we have a new empty pivot table. Now what I'll do here is that first I will put the block as rows, but then I will put the management as rows as well. Now look what it does. It creates all the management types under each of the block again and again. Look at this. So instead of us, creating this column and rows framework, we've created a rows only framework. And in this, I want to see the values first. So I'll just drag this here and look, you get the same data again. You get under this block, you have 69, 38 and 31 schools. And that is exactly what you had here as well. 69, 38 and 31 blocks, 31 schools. And it's the same for all the other blocks as well. So while this data can be represented in this manner, with the management as columns and blocks as rows, you can also do it everything as rows as well. So that's another way of using pivot tables. One more way of using pivot tables would be, let's say we don't want to look at the count of management, we want to add something in columns as well. So what I'll do is I'll first drag this out and it's gone. Now I want to add the highest class as columns. Okay, so I'll add it to columns. So my highest classes are either 10, 12, 4, 5 or 8. And then I'll drag the highest class as values. And there you go. Now this might look a little bit confusing to read, but if you go one step at a time, it will make a lot of sense. Let's look at this cell that is currently highlighted. It says 12. Now what does 12 mean? 12 means that in government sponsored schools of highest class 10, in this Gorubathan block, there are 12 schools. Right? And now if we go, let's look at this 17 here. Now what 17 tells you, there are 17 schools in the Kalimpong 1 block that are government sponsored and have the highest class 8. That is 17. And if you look at the totals column, you get the totals for Kalimpong 1 here, and you also get the totals in this column as well. They will be the same as everything that you have generated before. So Kalimpong 1 has 168 schools. That is exactly the figure that you have here as well. And the breakup of 168 is 88, 48, 32. That is exactly what you have here as well. But it's further broken down into class 10, 12, 4, 5 and 8. But the total will always be the same because all of this data has been generated from the same base data. This is the base data that is being used to generate all of this data. So keep in mind that is all there is to pivot tables. if only you are clear with what is the final picture that you want from the pivot table, you can use them very easily. Just put the particular field in the correct row, in the correct column, or in the correct values, and you'll get exactly the data that you need. Now let me show you one last thing before we wrap up. Here you see the blocks are first and then you have the management, and that is because the block is the first field here and the management the second one. Now if I drag block and bring it below management, you see the data is flipped now. Now what it's done is that it has taken all the blocks and put them under each of the management types. So it's really that simple. You can just drag and drop things and change your pivot table. And when you are satisfied with the final output of a pivot table, you can simply copy it into a new sheet, just select it, go to a new sheet and just paste your data as values. And there's your data. And now you can start working with it however you need. So that's all there is to pivot tables. But of course, it's one of those things that you really need to practice yourself to understand how it works. So I would highly recommend that you use some of your own data, whether it's from your own institution or your own circle, your own district, and then try to use pivot tables on it. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.